G'day guys, welcome to the Process of Success podcast. I'm here with professional cricketer who's just retired, Aiden Blizzard. Blizz, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Guys, those of you that might not know Aiden, he's played 21 first-class matches with a highest score of 141 not out, 40 List A matches and 98 2020 matches. Nearly raised the ton for your 100 2020 matches. Now, to start off with, I'd like to take our guests back to their sort of childhood. You were born in Shepparton. What was your childhood and what's your earliest memory of playing cricket?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks for having me. I did fall too short, but pretty happy in retirement now, so we won't worry about that milestone. I normally fall short just of them, so very consistent. Grew up in Shepparton, country area, very much a sporting community, very much revolved around footy in the summer, footy in the winter and cricket in the summer. So my earliest memory was probably in the backyard. I played a lot with my cousins, so they came up from Ballarat to Shepparton, and we'd always play in the school holidays. But first real game of cricket, I think I was in year 4, grade 4, made a golden duck playing for another school, Orvale Primary School. So from there on, I just sort of played primary school cricket, and we had to retire at 15, unfortunately. So that's probably part of my foundations of being able to get a quick score and then and lose the plot and get out before any milestone. So essentially that was me. Played a lot of other sports, basketball, Aussie rules obviously, and then anything else that was going in the court at the time. There was soccer balls, there was tennis rackets. So we'd sort of pick them up and have a crack.
Awesome. And then what point did you start to think, I want to make a career out of this? Did you think, I want to play cricket for Australia one day in the summer, and in the winter you're like, I want to play footy for a certain team? Or
Yeah, so to be 100% honest, up until I was 17, it was all about Aussie rules. So cricket was something that sort of filled my time in the summer, and I probably didn't put too much into it away from the summer other than the odd training camp with rep programs. So when I turned 17, I had a wrist reconstruction and a shoulder reconstruction within sort of 12 months. So that was quite challenging and sort of led me to pursue cricket passively. I went to the UK for a summer and ended up getting a rookie contract with Cricket Victoria. So while I say it wasn't a passion of mine to play elite cricket, there was always a desire to be an elite sports person. So the skills that were transferable from one sport to another were very much my strength. Yep. I could do that really naturally, but in terms of going to get elite cricket, it was just a matter of flicking the switch and really shifting my mind into a very specific goals, look at outcomes, how do I track through. So I didn't go through the traditional pathway, didn't play under 15s or under 17s or under 19s for my state. So I really went through the back door there. So there's plenty of hope for anyone who believes that the be all and end all is actually playing in those junior rep programs. There's plenty of ways around it. You just got to figure out how you're going to do that, which is essentially setting small goals and nailing them time after time.
Awesome. Well, you've answered a number of my questions.
Sorry about
about your junior pathways and stuff. That's cool. What when did you start to maybe get one-on-one coaching with your batting, or when did you start to take your training to the next level, I suppose?
Yeah, so as I said, with the football, I was very lucky. I was exposed to high-level programs really early. So what I believe training was actually, when I transferred it into cricket, it was quite advanced in terms of narrowing my mindset, figuring out what I wanted to achieve in a certain session. And some of those sessions, it's about competing. So one of the things I've learned across the journey is competing as often as you can in a net session is more beneficial than standing there and trying to say, all right, I want to lap just about every ball here. So one of the challenges there is obviously you've got to find your foundations and balance, and then you've got to be able to get yourself into that mindset where you can compete at the drop of a hat. And we think about the elements that affect cricket. We talk about weather, you talk about people declaring, you talk about someone's got injured, you've got to get out there quick and do your job. I think one of the best things about cricket is if you train well, or you train very specifically, then you might only get 8 minutes in the nets on Tuesday or Thursday at club training, but the benefits that you can take out of that are actually quite significant. So what I learnt was, didn't matter where I was or what elements were thrown at me. There's some pretty poor nets in Shepparton that I trained at. Often the balls had a hole in them rather than being new balls, which every bowler wants to bowl with. Sometimes we were using jugs balls, or even some other times we had tennis balls in a ball machine. And while they're manufactured now to be skill testing, they weren't back then. So the ability to adapt and be resilient to whatever's thrown at you and get the best out of that session was something that I learned through footy and through cricket. But in terms of the actual question, I didn't get too much one-on-one coaching until I was probably 14 or 15, and that was through mentorship, not to go specifically to get a coach. While it was good for me to naturally figure out what my game was, I think there was a few challenges there as well, that I had to learn my technique and develop a sound base that was going to get me to first class cricket and beyond, from the age of 18 through to 22, 23. So my development in that area was quite slow, but in saying that, I did find a way to compete and find a way to get the outcomes I needed. So there's a little bit of a double-edged knife there. I feel like if I had a bit sounder platform in terms of technique when I first arrived in Melbourne to play, then probably could have fast-tracked, but again, you deal with what you've got. So there weren't too many coaches around the country back then. So that was essentially my pathway. It's very much less traditional than most that go through the pathway, but there was a lot of reference and touch points there that helped me develop some internal skills that a lot of people struggle with when they get to the big time.
Awesome. Well, there's so much great content there, but it goes to show that you don't always need the best facilities and the best of everything. Sometimes what you do have really can be your benefit you later on. Just want to go a little bit more into, you said you had mentorship rather than coaching. What did that involve, and who were your mentors at that point?
Yeah, sure. So the guys were, guy's name's Rob DeLutis, and the other guy's name was Peter Whitelock. So they were at my local club. And in terms of mentorship, they had some great skills to achieve highly in the competition that we were in. They were both sort of local legends, but what we did talk about a number of times is what you're feeling, how you're feeling, what's your approach, and how do you debrief, or how do you close the loop. So
was this for both footy and cricket, or just
no? This was just cricket.
Yep.
So what I learnt there was, yes, the facilities, yes, there's a lot of things that we can't control, and cricket's one of those games where I still, to this day, I'll play a really nice forward defence, the ball will deviate slightly, it'll jump a little bit more and I'll nick it and I'm off. So the ability that I learnt was debrief it between when you get out and when you get off the field. That was the goal, to be able to debrief, and by the time I set foot through that gate or into the change rooms, I knew what my solution or what the challenge is for me to get better for the next time. So I know a lot of young kids, and it was in vogue back then. It was show your emotion and be really upset and be visibly upset. But the more I've got to know myself, I'm disappointed I got out. I think everyone knows I'm disappointed. There's no real need to carry on like an idiot, which is what I believe. So how do you constructively get some feedback live? Because next time I'm out there in the middle, I might play a shot that hits the middle of the bat, everyone applauses, but I wasn't in a great position to nail that. I just got lucky. So being able to give myself feedback in real time was one of the crucial pieces that I still haven't mastered, and a lot of Test cricketers are still trying to get around that. So being able to control your emotions, control your thoughts, and really bring it back to the basics of cricket. So I know a lot of people like looking at techniques. I know they love over dissecting situations, but the reality is, out there in the middle, we've got 10, 20, 30 seconds between balls. Use that time constructively. Control the things that you can control. And just let the rest happen. You're going to get out. You're going to get a great day sometimes where you maybe just get a feather and it just falls short, or you get given not out. So they're the ones you've got to really utilise. So every second of time that I spent with a mentor was really valuable and constructive.
Awesome. And that is exactly what our message is to our athletes. I think that the physical skill is only a very small part. You obviously have to get your foundations and your technique to a level.
Yep.
But we watch Steve Smith bat, and no one would coach that. It's just that he's able to understand himself as a person and a player, and everything that Blizz has touched on there about your emotions and your mind is exactly what we teach. So great to hear that that's something that your mentors were passing on to you, and I can't imagine it was something that was overly coached or spoken about it back then.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't structured in any way, shape or form. So like you, I like to think about what I can control in the game, and 90% of that is my processes, and then the outcomes are going to look after themselves. And I play a pretty high risk T20 game due to my role in the team, or that's how I've grown up. So while there is risk, I'm well and truly happy to take the accolades, but I do know that there is a risk involved, and sometimes it's not going to come off. So can be frustrating to watch at times, but my process was very transparent to everyone in my team. They knew what my strengths and my weaknesses were. So if I got out executing my strengths or attempting to, then we're all comfortable. As soon as I went away from that, I was disappointed, and I'm not sure that everyone was disappointed, but they had every right to be disappointed in myself for going down that path.
Yeah, and self-awareness is such a big thing for any person, let alone a sports person who's playing at an elite level. And that's been a theme throughout these interviews, speaking to all the elite players we've interviewed so far, that if you stick to your strengths and it's what you're practicing a lot, then your teammates can cop that if you get out playing a reverse sweep or a lap or something unconventional or caught on the boundary in a T20, they can cop that. But if you go away from what you practice, that's when they get frustrated. So now talking about, you mentioned about the Vic Junior pathway, you didn't play 15s, 17s and 19s. We do have a lot of young players that sort of miss out on rep teams of all levels. You had your footy as well, and you were wanting to play that until you were about 17. Were you disappointed when you maybe missed out on the 19s and you did lose hope for a little while, or was it? How was that experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd be lying if I wasn't saying that I was disappointed that, number one, I didn't get the opportunity to be selected, but we're all human, so whether we can mask our disappointment or not, if you don't get picked in something, that hurts, no matter what it is. So I'm an athlete, and I strive for, I've got goals, and I'll go and do everything I can to get to that goal. So by not getting picked, absolutely disappointed. But I got to a stage where I knew what I could do better, and I knew the areas that I needed to improve, and that takes a long time to master. So I made a career out of being picked 10 or 11 in every cricket team that I played in. I think there's maybe one season or 2 seasons of cricket where I knew my spot was safe, but every other team I played in around the world, I was the 10th or 11th picked. So there's insecurities there. So if you're waiting for the team to be announced, or your chairman of selectors is at training and you're waiting for a tap on the shoulder that may or may not come, I can't control that, but that happens. That happens in the back of the mind. So that's very normal. That's normal. But I had to build a career. So 14 years of cricket, 15 years in a system of waiting to be tapped on the shoulder. If I wasn't, then I had to perform or do my job to then get selected in the next team. So while...
Did it get easier as you got older?
No, definitely not. It was more of an awareness that I can control this, I can't control this. So what are the things I can control? And what I built my career on was, I did what I did. I was very transparent in my skill set. So I'm going to go out there, I'm going to do the job that you need me to do, whether it's up the top or down the bottom. And what I could control was what I brought to the team. So whether I was out there running around, tapping the bowlers on the back, saying well done, getting hats, etc., or if I was running drinks around the side, or whatever my role was, I was going to nail it. So I possibly squeezed an extra couple of years out of my cricketing career due to my presence around the change rooms, due to what I brought at training when we were travelling. When we have a loss, yes, it's disappointing, but do we all need to kick cans? Like, can we actually be positive and figure out what's happened and then go and address it? So that was what I brought to every team I played in. Maybe I did overachieve, maybe I underachieved. I'm going to leave that for others to judge, but that's essentially what I hung my hat on. So if anyone asks about me around Australia or around the world, I'd like them to say he gave us everything and he was positive on the culture. So
awesome. And I'm sure you're quite content with that.
Absolutely.
Whether you scored the hundreds or took the wickets or whatever, you'd be content that you gave everything.
Absolutely. And as I said, there's games where I was disappointed with my outcome, but I was lucky enough. We won 5 Big Bash titles, and I've won 7 across the world out of 98 games. I'm pretty comfortable that that's a decent strike rate.
That's a pretty good record.
And my average probably could have been a lot higher, and my strike rate could have been lower. But I'm just going to take the team team accolades there. It's not a cliche. I'm genuinely really proud of that achievement.
Awesome. And it goes to show that your attitude and the way you see things, your outlook, has such a big impact. Because if you had been someone who wanted to be the best player and felt frustrated, annoyed, and that showed in the way your presence in the change room was, you probably would have been maybe delisted a long time ago. So
yeah, you are. And what I bring versus off the field versus on the field, it can be the difference in getting a spot in a team. So we talk about 3 skill sets for players, but to me there's 4. Like, what are you going to bring when you're down and out, when you've been dropped, when you're struggling for form? What are you actually going to bring the team?
As a person.
Absolutely. So whether that's a training, and I bowl these horrible little off breaks that they're so slow, they're not really realistic for anyone, but I love bowling them and got into a contest, and that's what I could bring to a net session, because I'm not going to bowl fast. There's only so much fielding you can do while training's on. So yeah, what can you do to help the boys out?
Great message for anyone watching. It's not just the 3 skill sets on the field, but who you are as a person off the field. Going back, progressing throughout your career now, what age did you transition into Melbourne grade cricket, and did you relocate up here full time?
Yeah, I did. So I finished year 12. I turned 18 in June, and I transitioned in that year. So it was a 2-hour trip. So the first half of the season up until Christmas, I came up and back. 2-hour trip, which got a little bit painful after a while, but that's what I needed to do. So I did it.
And then what age were you at this point?
18. Yeah, so I got my licence.
Yeah.
So that was my transition. Then I went to the UK and then sort of came back and moved in and sort of made it work for me. So I was 19 when I fully relocated and immersed myself.
Yeah.
If Shepparton was closer, or if I lived in Melbourne, I definitely would have got into the Premier system a lot earlier. Yeah. However, that's what it was, and as I've sort of, the message will keep coming through. It's just that's what it was, and I found a way to get to that next level. So for me, I didn't have the goal of playing for Australia or playing for Victoria. It was what was next. So Premier cricket into second 11 cricket, interstate cricket, and then you've got T20 50 over 4-day cricket. So that was essentially how I said it. Yeah. While if you asked me, I would have said yes, I want to play for Australia. I was firmly fixed on what have I got to do to get to that next level, and then once I was there, you got to consolidate and then go again. So it was really breaking down those goals. And when you talk about Premier cricket, we initially were at Punt Road, and the nets were only sort of half size. They weren't even 3/4. They were half. So if anyone bowled a bouncer, sometimes it would hit the lip and sort of fly up. So that was quite scary. Yeah. But that again, I just had to make do with what we had. So that was a great opportunity for me to develop some resilience and fear, but still find a way to get the volume in, have a hit on the outfield, and that's one of the things that I think goes unnoticed for a lot of cricketers wanting to go through. Is I played at Mumbai Indians for 4 IPL seasons, and we had a couple of Champions Leagues as well. But Rohit Sharma hits balls on the outfield, stands there, and the coach will throw balls they'll bounce up, they'll bounce down, or he'll throw some spinners, and that's actually part of his routine, is to get into some good habits. So you talk about getting your feet into a good place, hands back, balance. Like, the ball is going to be bouncing up and down all over the place. So for world-class players to be able to do it, that means I can definitely do it at Premier cricket level. That means anyone from under IPL, Rohit Sharma plays at Mumbai Indians, one of the world's best one-day cricketers. We can all find a way. So it doesn't matter where you are. You could be on a concrete path, you could be on a nature strip. There's always a way. Absolutely. If you want to. And then it's about being able to frame it in your mind that you're getting benefit out of it. So we can have one session together. What you take out of it and what I take out of it will be completely different, but that's on me and that's on you. So that's what I chose to do every time. Adverse conditions, I'd be struggling, but I'd always find a way to get a positive out of it.
Awesome, and that so far seems like it's a theme of who you are as a person, was just see the best in everything, which is what extended your career for 15 seasons.
Absolutely.
So you said you missed out on the 19s state team.
Yep.
How did you then get into your rookie contract? Was that on the back of good grade performances?
Yeah, it was. So I played 4 or 5 games in the second team for Richmond Cricket Club, and then I played the second half of the season in the first. So I got some scores, a couple of over 50, but it was the way I went about it as well. I was quite aggressive. I was a country cricketer, so I was a little bit less technically sound or picturesque or pretty. And David Hooks was actually the person who sort of identified me as someone that he wanted to see in the squad. So from there I went to the UK, and obviously Cricket Victoria had a tour over there, so I joined the tour, and then the rest is history. So for me it was just about consistency as a person and as a cricketer. My style of game was adverse to consistency, the way I went about it, but I figured out pretty quickly that I only need 3 or 4 shots to score my runs from and boundaries from, and then the rest of it would look after itself. So if I had positive intent, I'd get up the other end, and then if it was in my zone, I'd absolutely boom it. Yeah. So that was what my strategy was early, and that was probably what my strategy was towards the end of my career in T20 cricket. But essentially, that was me finding a way to get to that next level.
Yeah, and then what was your debut, your first professional game like, and how did you feel walking into a change room and an environment with so many big players, so many great players?
Yeah, so I played a second 11 game, and that was with Shane Warne came back from his diuretic ban.
Yep.
So I played at Junction Oval with Warney, and I remember walking in and he said, "G'day mate, my name's Shane," and I sort of froze. It was deer in headlights. That was probably my first real experience with some elite players.
Yep.
But my first game I played for Victoria against South Australia at the Junction Oval. Jason Gillespie got me out second ball. It was a wet deck. I think we had a 35 over game. I was on Channel 9, and yeah, I went to sort of play it, followed it a tiny bit, clipped the top of my glove, and the rest was history. So,
so ducking your first ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So that was what it was. But that was a really cool experience where played with Victoria, obviously played against South Australia. Greg Blewett lipping up from square leg. Nothing bad. It was just, what are you going to do here, mate? Like, you're on the big stage. Channel 9's here. It's raining. 35 overs. What are you going to do? So yeah, he definitely got in my head. But I was very lucky. The Vics were very generous in terms of pre-season games and opportunities throughout the season, where they were a very strong squad. A lot of Shield players were coming and going through the second 11. So I got exposure to those guys pretty quickly, and they were very welcoming for me. So the jump up once I got there was not too bad, because I've been around the squad for a number of seasons, and the culture was more around, Greg Shipper was a coach, he coached well, but senior players were coaching the junior players, and then once the junior players were getting to sort of mid-level, they were coaching the junior players coming through again. So the culture there around ownership of the next generation coming through was very strong. And Greg Shipper was a really great technical coach. So I learned a lot about my game, but I learned a lot about my game through coaching others as well. So I went down to some 17s and emerging bush rangers, and even helped out every now and then with the Vic Spirit girls to go and do some coaching. So the more I coached, the better I got as a player as well.
Awesome. Now we're going to get into coaching in a little while, and culture in a minute, but it sounds like you've got a reasonable memory of your first game with Bluey sort of mouthing you off a bit, but I suppose a lot of people, they get to the next level and maybe they fail early, if you want to call it a failure. Obviously you learnt from it, but did you walk off the ground thinking, oh, that was just too hard, or I'm not up to it, or was there a bit of self-doubt there?
Yeah, there's self-doubt. You still get self-doubt now when you walk out to bat, or you get out in a Big Bash game, to be brutally honest. But yeah, at some stage, I think I remember a net session where Shane Harwood, Mick Lewis and Ian Harvey were bowling, and they had decent balls, and it was at the Junction Oval again. I think the MCG was getting redeveloped, and they were just absolutely nailing me. It was short of a length, there were short balls, and then I was really struggling, absolutely struggling. So to go back to Premier Cricket, to then be a decent player there, and then to come back to state training, it was getting quite challenging. But for me, it was about figuring out what my process is and then sticking to that. So what I would do is I'd get to that level, I'd want to prove that I was good enough to myself and externally, but what happened was I was going away from what my game was. So identifying that at Premier Cricket was quite natural for me, but going up again, I had to really hone it, bring it back and just go, do you know what, I can drive, I'm a decent lever, so let's drive if it's really under my nose. Everything else I'm going to leave. If there's a cut shot, I'm going for the cut shot. And that was as complex as it needed to be.
So is that what it was in Premier cricket? Or did you have to sort of bring it in a bit tighter?
Yeah, so Premier cricket was just go.
Right. Okay.
Essentially it was go. What I had to learn was, for me to be successful at the next level, I needed to be able to replicate that recipe everywhere I went. So it wasn't to just use that Premier cricket to go to the next level, it was actually hone it back and then plock that back into Premier cricket. So my strike rate early on would have been 100, 120. Didn't matter if it was red ball or white ball, I was just going. So I had to learn to build an innings, play it, go through the gears essentially, and really just hone it back. And then once I figured that out, it was much easier for me to press turbo in a red ball game when needed versus going out there and playing what I did. So that was a big learning experience, and those guys were so good, and I was so raw, and it really showed. So a lot of self-doubt, but I knew that I was capable, I just didn't know how. So I had to go and figure it out. So you talk to people, they can give you advice, they can tell you what to do, but essentially as soon as I get told what to do, it normally just bounces straight back off me. It's about me figuring it out. So I did some extra sessions and really worked hard on identifying what I could and couldn't do, and then worked hard on the strengths. And then if a weakness was getting me out, I had to fix it. If it wasn't getting me out, I'd find a way just to work with it.
Manage it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what's really interesting there is and being a coach now, it's sort of, you see a player's strengths and you encourage them to play around their strengths, but once they get to the next level, there's a fine line about, do you just stay going hard like you were doing, or do you have to sort of pull it back a bit and change a few things and then reinvent yourself? But the key is self-awareness and continually learning, continually trying to find a way in the environment you're in, which you obviously did very well. Now, you then went from Victoria to Tasmania. Was that the next step?
South Australia
South
first.
Australia was next.
This is hard to keep up with.
I did try to do my research, but South Australia was next.
Yep.
And what was that transition like? And was that with the goal of maybe playing more red ball cricket?
Yeah, absolutely. So I played, we just won 3 T20 titles. The boys had won 4, but I'd won 3 with the Vics. I'd played 1 Shield game, and then I was essentially playing one-day cricket and one-day cricket and T20. So essentially I wanted an opportunity to play red ball cricket. I still love that version of the game. 4 days of cricket, it's a real test of skill, test of character, and getting into day 4 after lunch, after teas is really tough. So that's what I wanted to do. I went there, I had a really good season with the red ball. Struggled a little bit with white, but I still look back at my white ball stuff, and I really didn't give myself every opportunity to perform at the white ball level. I did it well at Premier cricket, but at domestic level, I didn't figure out my game and how it was going to work for the team. So the T20
across
version.
both formats, 2020 and
No, T20 I was pretty comfortable with. I had a role and I went out and played it. So when I was with Victoria, I'd go out and I'd take the game on. If I got out in the process, so be it. But we always got a good start. Cameron White, Dave Hussey, Andrew McDonald were sort of in the middle. And Adam Crosswaite was quite good back then as well, who was sort of towards the end. So my role was to go out, get a good start, give the boys a little bit of breathing space, and then they'd build a platform. But as you go on, everyone's after consistency. So there's a trade-off there. If you want consistency, then the strike rate's got to come down, the risk's got to come down. Then you're not necessarily getting those starts. So that was my strategy with T20. Red ball was essentially I can leave. I know where my off stump is. Had a few issues LBW early. It was just my foot was locking off. And as soon as I fixed that, I was good. I was ready to go. So the 50 over cricket, I didn't figure it out. There was some sweet spot, and I just couldn't replicate it time and time again. So that was a big challenge for me that I look back and I still didn't figure it out.
Okay. And what was the reason for the really successful red ball 4-day season, do you think? Was it change of environment, something new challenge, or what you wanted to prove yourself to others, or what do you think was the driver behind having that?
Yeah. So I had free reign essentially, like go out, do what you do, and that's all we need from you. I didn't overdo it in terms of hitting a lot of balls. That's something I went back to towards the end of my career. I started hitting a lot of balls because felt like I needed to, but in reality is my attention span is not significant. I can't hit balls for 3 hours and then have an hour off and then go out and play a game of cricket. So for me, it was about finding the quality and then stopping. As soon as I was ready and felt good, that was it. So even towards the end of my T20 career, my net sessions were about half the time as anyone else because I got the quality that I needed. I was comfortable and that was it. I'd stop. So that first year of South Australian cricket was great for me. It was essentially, what do you need? Let's go do it and go from there. So that was my sweet spot, essentially.
Awesome. And who was the coach at that point?
Mark Sorrell was the coach. Jeff Vaughan was the assistant. So Jeff's now at Cricket Tas, is the assistant coach there.
Okay.
But yeah, essentially, and Tim Nielsen had a bit to do with it there. So Tim was very influential for me. Spent a bit of time at the Cricket Academy with Tim, and one of the key messages that I learnt from Tim was he understood that when I was on and when I wasn't on, and the difference was it was a mindset, but how do you communicate that mindset for me to understand, and how do you get that into my words that I could understand in my head? So a lot of people say watch the ball, and that is the most generic cricket term that I've ever heard, but essentially for me it was there's a difference between seeing the ball and watching the ball. So the terminology that Tim gave it was if there's a TV in front of you, are you seeing the TV or are you watching it? And I'd say, well, I'm watching it. He's like, but are you? So what are you actually watching? I'm like, I'm watching the whole lot. He's like, that's good. Okay, so when the cricket ball comes down and you're not on, what's happening? I'm like, I'm seeing the ball. I'm not actually watching it. So for me, it was find the ball. So I'd find the ball. I'd concentrate as hard as I could on trying to find the seam or the stitching, and that was me narrowing my focus to be on. And then once I was just narrowing at that, everything else took care of itself. Pre-movements, backlifts, triggers, you name it, everything fell into place. So when I talk about later in my career, less is more, if I had 6, 12, 20 balls that I was dead set on, that was it. I was done. That was done. So if I did that for a long period of time, I'd use all that energy that I needed for later on. So that was essentially the turning point for me in terms of identifying, but then replicating with all the other challenges in life and cricket and all sorts. That's when that was my go-to to get into some form.
Awesome. Now, you've covered so much there. Was going to ask about your mindset and your routines a bit later on, but we'll get into that now. So a bit more on that process. As you sort of tap your bat and the bowls at the top of their mark, what was at what point did you really switch on and try and pick up the seam? Did you follow the ball in the bowler's hand the whole way, or did you watch a certain spot out at like where the ball would be released from, and was it that word, where's the ball, or find the ball?
Find the ball, yeah. So early on I was watching it from the start of the bowler's run up. Didn't matter if they were spinner, pace, medium pacer, I just watched it and I was exhausted. I just couldn't do it. So what I used to do, red ball game, I'd see if I could pick up shiny side, rough side in their run up. Very rarely do they change it straight up, and then when the bowler got into their load up, that's when I'd try and switch on. But one of my triggers was actually, so I'd mark leg stump, I'd mark middle stump, and I'd sort of plonk my foot somewhere in between. But I used to lift the bat up, and my bat used to tap me on the back shoulder. So for me, that was keeping my hands in to tap it up. Tendency being a country boy is I used to choke the bat. So if I was getting into trouble, my bat would be out towards gully. Then I'd be trying to bring my hands around and my head would be plonked over, hence the LBW troubles early on in my career. So for me it was the load up. It was find the ball, and my top hand was sort of bringing the bat up and I was tapping that on the back shoulder. And then in between balls.
So was that like a trigger to switch on?
Yep, absolutely. Subconscious trigger.
Yep.
So I did it that often that it became a trigger.
Yep.
And then when I'd look back at footage, if I was struggling, that would be gone. Wow. So that was my trigger. Whether or not it was happening in live time, I couldn't tell, but I had a couple of teammates that knew my game as I knew theirs, and they'd be like, Blizz, you're not switching on, like you're not tapping in. So that was really strong, and that was one of the best things about the Victorian culture back then, was we all knew each other's games really intimately. So it didn't matter if I was playing second 11, even at club cricket. I played against players before and just said, mate, it's not the same as mine, but you're not actually, your trigger's not working. They'd be like, oh, really?
Yeah,
And you're like, yeah, like go sort it out.
Yeah.
So it was a big sort of player-driven environment.
Awesome. And we're going to get into culture and Paddy Upton in a minute. That I've read an interesting article from the Player's Voice, which Paddy Upton wrote up. You might have seen it, about Jacques Callis and watching the ball.
Yep.
And it took 8 hours or something for him to fully understand what that meant, because, like you say, it's such an overrated or overused saying, watch the ball, whereas as a batter, we don't bat with our eyes closed. We always watch the ball. We always see the ball.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's having a clear mind and the focus on the right thing that allows us to make good decisions and execute our skill.
Yeah, it is. And what I said before, like if we have a session and we're on an average surface, and what I take away versus what you take away, that's just human nature. So when it comes to language, my language doesn't necessarily resonate with you, and vice versa. So it's about, when you're coaching and when you're an athlete, it's about figuring out what those words are that mean something to you, or the actions of what they mean. So it takes Jacques 8 hours, takes me 10 minutes. Other days it's going to take me more than 8 hours, and other days it's going to take Jacques 2 balls. So everyone's human, especially when they get to that level. The things that they work on are very simple. It's not overly complicated. So when we're doing it at club level or below, just keep it simple. That's essentially where it's at.
Awesome. Very, very important message. Now, on to culture. You've mentioned a number of teams. You have been in a number of different change rooms and environments. What do you think are important traits? And now that you're into coaching, what do you think are important traits for an environment?
Yeah, well, I think the challenge that I see in cricket is there's a lot of egos. Doesn't matter if you're at club cricket, doesn't matter if you're in community level or if you're at elite cricket. There's a lot of people that like to be the alpha male in the change rooms, and for me, is the alpha male being beneficial to the people under, or are they blocking the chance of a culture coming through? So for me, it was about being a quality person, and I know that means different things to different people, but essentially what I see around cultures is how is everyone helping each other, or what is it that we're all doing to get to that end goal? So if the things that I'm doing are helping me to give output, but I'm actually drowning, suffocating or roadblocking to other people, through other people in that process, then it's either me or it's those people that are not in the right headspace. So culture for me is around, how do you create the most efficient workplace for everyone to achieve their goals? Now, I was 11th or 10th picked in most teams, which brings all sorts of challenge when it comes to performance, but you got to remember that 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 players, when we talk about the Big Bash, they all want to play. So how do we best keep them in decent shape, as in cricket-wise, but how do you keep them in a great headspace? So the most important thing is, what do they want to do at training? What do they need to do? So that's one of the big things that I'm learning in cricket, is wants versus needs are pretty significant. So I want to go out and hit balls for an hour. Okay, that's nice, but what do you actually need to be ready to play tomorrow? So when you're talking about cultures, if you can get everyone agreeing on the end goal, then we're good. But then the processes in place are the most important part. And when we talk about processes, everyone likes to check in on goals and targets, and these are our stats. But outcomes in cricket, there's only certain things you can control. And for me, I can control when the ball gets bowled, I can react, and that's it. What I can't control is the weather, can't control the state of the ball, can't control anything else within the stadium. All I can control is the shot that I choose to play at that one moment. So if everyone's on board with that, what can you control to help get to the outcome? Then we're good. We're really good. If you start thinking about what are the other things that I can do that I can't control, that's when you start to get a clouded environment. So if I'm creating a team from scratch, that's what I'm doing. These are the things that we can control. You focus on those. These are the things we can't control. We're aware of them, but we can't control them. And then let's all go ahead and figure out what we can do to get to that end point.
And did that get to a point where if someone was complaining about weather or the pitch or umpiring decision or something, where you'd almost sort of say, come on mate, it's not in our control, let's not talk, let's not worry about it?
Essentially, yes. So human nature is find a way. We're survivors. So if something goes against us, it's the fight or flight. Essentially, we'll go, oh, yes, well, do you know what? I acknowledge that the weather was poor, but what could we control? So yes, absolutely. We can't control that. So what do we want to do about it? Like the umpire gives you a poor decision, what can you actually do? You can't change it. You can by going at the umpire, getting reported and not playing the next game, and then it still doesn't change. No. So essentially that's what we focused on at the Thunder the last 2 or 3 seasons, and while outcomes weren't great last season, we got it right, and I think the formula there is really what we want in athletes moving forward. If I am contracting an athlete, what I want to see is an attitude that you can work with. Talent will sort of take care of itself, but are they going to take ownership of their career, and how are they going to help people around them? And that's essentially what we look for.
Awesome. And now, just on the Sydney Thunder, you won the championship, the title with them.
Yep.
Paddy Upton was in charge then, and he's someone I admire.
Yep.
I listen to a lot of his stuff, and I learn a lot about his methods. You also had Callis and Hussey there as well. But what are Paddy Upton's great strengths in bringing sort of his skills to a group?
Yeah, so Paddy's definitely a facilitator. When it comes to X's and O's and techniques and things, Paddy doesn't do too much of that. He really focuses on the individual, and as I said before, what can he or the coaching staff do to get you to the point where you need to be? So one of the challenges that we have in the Big Bash is the lists are either really experienced or really young. There's very few sort of middle-aged lists. So one of the strengths that I found when I was in Victoria was 90% of the players in the team, it was probably myself and Adam Crosswaite, Rob Quiney, Michael Klinger, we sort of rotated through that team, but we were the inexperienced ones, and everyone else knew their game back to front. So they would have been 28, 29, 30-year-olds. So it's about what Paddy did was understood what the top experienced guys needed and wanted, and that's 90% of the time that's really easy to facilitate. And then the younger guys, it's about educating and finding their sweet spot as to what they need. So Paddy's philosophy was, we're not all the same person, so we don't get treated the same. It's all individual basis, and then we'll come together as a group. This is what we're out to achieve, and then over to the players to facilitate how they best think that they'll be able to achieve it. So it's a great model. Paddy's philosophies and theories are very progressive compared to cricket. Has over 150 years of tradition. So sometimes cultures take a long while to change. We were really lucky. We had Mike Hussey and Nick Cummins was there as well, who were dead set determined on changing culture. And Mike was amazing. I think I said to someone the other day, you cannot replace Mike Hussey in any team. So to be able to work under him and work with Jark was more about understanding what they do for them rather than what they do for others. And what they did was they did their stuff, and then they looked for how they could help everyone else really quickly. And then how they help people is completely different. Sometimes it was technically you just pick up on something, and other times it was, mate, have you thought about this? And you're like, well, if Jark's thinking about that, well, that can't be too hard.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was essentially what Paddy did, and the culture at the Thunder now. And Sydney Thunder, we always judged on their on-field results, but I think the pathway for some players in that squad now, you talk about Arjun there and Chris Green in particular, they're onwards and upwards. Their mindset is as elite as they could get to at the moment. So hopefully there's some quality players that get recruited and take a little bit of pressure off those guys, so then they can continue to perform. But there's some good stuff happening down there.
Awesome. And I think it's hard for a lot of young players to understand the difference between being selfish and selfless. But every cricketer has to be selfish to some extent. They have to look after themselves,
Yep.
like you said with Hussey and Callis, before they can then go and help others. And you don't want to be a selfish person, but as a player, you need to make sure you're hitting enough balls for you to be the best you can be before you can help others.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you do see with Jacques and Mike in particular is they're happy to throw balls. They'll throw balls to people before or after training. And there's a point in time where you've got to stop throwing balls because your arm's going to fall off. But we're limited on resources in everything we do. AFL clubs will say they're limited on resources. Big Bash franchises, club teams, everyone thinks they're limited on resources, and most of the time they are. But what you can do is, what are our resources that we're not using? So Mike Hussey's a great cricket brain. He's going to go throw some balls. Like, how's that going to be detrimental to anyone in the squad? It's not. So if you're a young player coming through at the moment, learn how to use a sidearm, learn how to catch with a glove, learn to get comfortable throwing and helping other people out, because it comes back in tenfold. And what you learn by observing and throwing and being front and centre in front of other people is quite phenomenal. So, and you'll learn a lot about life as well. If you can put the right lens on for that moment, then you're going to learn a lot. So if I'm throwing balls to a 12-year-old, I'm learning a lot about my communication, dissecting, breaking things down. So if you're coming through the ranks, throw more balls, like be around people. It's going to be beneficial. You've just got to figure out how to view that rather than just seeing it as a chore or something that you don't really want to do.
I think that's a lost art too. I think what I see in teenagers these days, when I was growing up in Alice Springs, I didn't sort of have my father as a coach, and I'd just throw balls with another player. And I think these days a lot of kids go to the nets and have bowling machines fed to them, or they have a coach, and they don't actually go and throw balls at each other and pair up and practice. And it is such an important skill. Now, moving on to the IPL, you said you had 4 years with the Mumbai Indians. Mm-hmm. What an incredible experience that must have been. I understand, I think you opened the batting with Tendulkar a few times.
Yep.
How was that, walking out with the god?
Yes.
And sort of getting to know him, and then what are some of the traits you've seen? You've mentioned Hussey and Callis. You've played with and against the best players that have walked the earth. What are some of the traits you see in the best players?
Yeah, so to open the batting with Sachin that's still something I pinch myself over. I retired last week, and there was a picture came up with myself and Sachin talking in the middle of the wicket, and I still look at it now and think it's surreal. I grew up in Shepparton. Played local cricket, played from a primary school. Like, I didn't know that was achievable. So that was pretty cool in itself. But to play for Mumbai in Mumbai at Wankhede Stadium, which is Sachin's home stadium, that stadium goes straight up. It's on a small block of land in the middle of Mumbai, and the crowd is on top of you. So anyone that you come across in terms of playing elite cricket, if they've played there and Sachin's played, they will tell you that it's absolutely electric. So it's impossible to describe, but you think about the humidity, you think about the heat over there, you think about the national audience of the IPL, and then you're walking out with Sachin's. It's pretty phenomenal. So that was one of the highlights of my career that I still pinch myself over. But in terms of the players, they know what they need. Every single one of them know what they need. If they're working on something, or even in any session, Clint Mackay's a great one. So Clint says to me, and I've played a lot of cricket with Clint, but he says, mate, I'm working on these. Like, can you just give me some feedback where you think it's necessary? So Clint will come in and bowl his wide Yorkers, or he'll bowl his slow balls, or he'll change the angle and he'll set a field, and I know what's coming. He knows that I know what's coming, but we're competing and we're trying to get better between the pair of us. So that's an example of the players who are at the top are actually quite selfless in terms of, I'm going to do this, I need you to try and hit me. Like, I want to get better. So while it is uber competitive, and we're all competing for spots, the piece where I still pinch myself is when Harbhajan comes and bowls and asks for some feedback on his lengths, or we had a left arm off spinner called Oja, who played Test cricket for India, and he was coming around the wicket to me as a lefty, and he was trying to hit me in the heel. And essentially, what the coach said was, go hard after him. Like, he needs to get better at this. And Oj worked really hard, and I was in some decent form one day, and I was bopping him everywhere, and then the next, he was just nailing my foot. I could not, for the life of me, hit him away. So the players at that level are while they're very guarded, they won't outwardly speak about some of the things that they're struggling with. They genuinely work hard on them. So each session, very rarely do they not have an outcome that they're looking for, or something that they're working on. So we have a certain amount of time in the day, and the lower level of cricket, the less time you've got, and the facilities won't be as great as at that, and the balls won't be great, but what you have got is time. So 60 seconds is 60 seconds at the elite level, and it's 60 seconds at community level. So what you do with that time is essentially what gets you better. So that's one of the biggest things I learnt. And these guys are happy to turn up early or stay late.
To do whatever it takes. Awesome. And it just, the message I get there is self-awareness, is just understanding what they need to do to get better. Really, really interesting. And now, with your coach's hat on, transitioning into your next phase, what sort of things, it must have been an amazing experience having Ponting on one side and Tendulkar on another, what can you sort of, off the top of your head, what do you think you learnt from those guys that you're going to take forward into your own coaching?
Yeah, well, what I know is what works for me doesn't work for you. What works for you won't work for someone else. So it's about being diverse in your language, being open to finding new ways to communicate with players, communicate with staff, communicate with everyone, essentially, the message will very rarely does the message be very complex. It's about how you can get someone else to understand it, or how you can lead them on a journey to get to that end point. So for some players, you do need to take them on a journey where they need to stuff up a whole heap of times until they figure it out. Some others you can talk direct to and they'll figure it out pretty quick, but we're all different. We all love the game and we all want similar outcomes, but how you deal with person A versus B versus C is completely different. So as a coach, you need to be able to change those ways, absolutely change them. So that's one of the biggest things I've learned across the journey. I'm still figuring out how to communicate, and as is Ricky Ponting, as is Justin Langer, they've all reinvented themselves to diversify and evolve their communication styles. But talk about Gen X, Gen Y and the millennials, like we've all just got to keep evolving. And the day that we think that we know what's going on is the day that you're going to fall behind. Yeah. So keep studying, keep reading, keep asking for feedback. The more comfortable you are in getting feedback, the better you're going to get. And like anything, it's how you take it. So if you think it's a negative, then yeah, it's a negative. But if you see it as an opportunity to understand what one of your players or a few of your players are going through, then that's good. That's good.
I think also a lot of young people probably don't realise, and having sort of transitioning from a player, still playing a bit, but to coaching now, is a lot of the best players sometimes aren't the best coaches because things came easy to them, and to be a great coach you have to be a good communicator, and as Blizzard said, guys like Ponting and Langer, they are very good coaches because they're evolving and they're always learning, and anyone who's successful in life just has a growth mindset of always trying to learn. Yeah,
absolutely. And Ricky will be the first to admit that his journey was, he had a very good journey in terms of playing, but he has a lot of personalities he's had to deal with and captain and coach and mentor across his journey. So he was very successful as a captain, and if he pursued coaching full time, he would be as good as, if not the best in the world.
Now we're going to have to start wrapping up shortly. It's been an amazing insight, and we could talk for days by the sounds of it. But just a couple more things. You've touched on your preparation. How did your preparation differ from Red Bull to 2020? In the days leading up, let's say.
Yeah, I'd say it didn't much, to be honest, and that was a real challenge for me to get my head around. Obviously, when I talked before about 5 balls, 20 balls, 30 balls, 8 hours, that was my preparation, was to find the ball, where's it pitched, where are my feet, how am I going?
So it was a feeling thing. When you got
100%.
that feeling,
100%.
No matter what, a number of balls didn't matter, it was a feeling thing.
Yep, 100%. So that was the outcome I needed to achieve, and then when I got it, that was it. So some days when you travel and you come back from BBL or you get dropped and you've got to go play a game of cricket, sometimes you just got to turn up on the morning and go and have some throwdowns. And I still get really frustrated at people with throwdowns at times, as sort of just stand there, hit the ball into the fence, and like they're dead set just wasting everyone's time, each other's time. So what's the purpose of the throwdowns? Like, so yeah, I just want a couple of throws. Like, that's not narrow enough. Like, what do you actually want from it? So some people get underarms and they hit them. For me, it was about finding that seam and hitting the ball, and then I was good. So yeah, that was the only thing that changed for me. But initially, I would hit truckloads of balls, and the game's exactly the same. One ball's going to swing a bit longer. Yeah. The other ball is just it's got to go the journey.
And how do you switch off away from cricket? Throughout your career, what did you do to get away from the game?
Yeah, so I studied a lot. I figured out when I was about 24 that I needed to do things away from cricket. So it's easy to get into a mindset where you're busy. So we're all busy. We can be as busy as we want to be busy, but for me it was about being constructive with my time. So I needed things to achieve, and I'm sure that everyone's got that. I'm very much an achievement-based person. Is what do I need to do? So study. I started a life coaching business, and then for the last 4 years of my career, or 5 years, I worked as a general manager at a cricket college, and then I went up to the ACT and I ran the high performance program up there. So for me it was about stimulating in positive ways rather than just letting it go negative. So video games, watching movies or sitting on the couch were not constructive time for me, and I'd prefer to get a little bit tired in terms of exhaustion and sleep rather than do nothing and then try and sleep, because my sleep was restless. So that was one of the biggest things for me.
Interesting. You've just mentioned what sort of things you've been doing away from cricket. You've just announced your retirement.
Yep.
Congratulations on your fantastic career. So what is next for you now? You've finished in the ACT?
Yeah, so I relocated to Melbourne. I've got 2 units of a Master of Business Admin to complete, so concentrating on getting that done. My wife's got a talent management business, so I'm sort of helping her, and I'm actually spending some time with my son, who's nearly 2. So throughout my career, 14, 15 years I've been contracted. I've travelled for 9 or 10 of those, and I've been with my wife for 9 of those. So essentially, we talk about selfish and selfless. She's been very selfless, and I could be classified as selfish, but I was really pursuing my goals hard. So now we've relocated to Melbourne to be closer to our family, which is our support network, and I'll do what I need to do in terms of getting my study finished, and then I'll see what the universe presents. But at the moment, I'm really enjoying being a dad, and I'm enjoying studying. It's a completely different way to stimulate my mind. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I don't know what I'll be doing in 6, 12, 24 months, 10 years, but I know that I'll have some sort of involvement in performance, whether that's coaching actively or mentoring or helping others. It's an area of passion, and it doesn't necessarily have to be cricket. I think the transferables that you get from elite level sport are very much, they don't discriminate. You can cross over into just about any category or subject. So I'll utilise them to my best ability, but I'm really passionate about helping people. So if I can share some lessons or lead them on a journey, then I'm more than happy to do so.
Awesome. Well, one thing's for sure is you're not going to be short of opportunities with your knowledge. 4 quick questions to finish. Where do you think the future of the game's going?
It's T20 centric, but Test cricket's not going anywhere. So if anything drops, it'll be 50 over cricket. Yep. Domestic T20 is a juggernaut that we can't ignore. And then in terms of club/community cricket, I think T20 is on its way in as well. So the more people I talk to, the more they want to play T20 cricket. To number one, be able to spend more time with their family. But the demands of life, I don't know what they were back in the day, but it seems to be that everyone is busier. So for me personally, I enjoy playing white ball cricket, and I'll do so where possible moving forward.
Yep. And what's the best piece of advice you've ever received, or a great piece of advice you'd pass on to a younger player now?
Find a way, I think, is if you want it or you want something desperate enough, you'll find a way. So if the why is big enough, the how will take care of itself. So that's what I've set my life on, and I'll continue to do so until I fail at that, and then I'll figure out something else. But to this point, it's been pretty successful for me, so
brilliant.
I'll go with that.
Brilliant. Second last question, what's your definition of success?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my definition of success is achieving and leaving somewhere in a better place than what it was when I started. So I could successfully drink this water and I couldn't replace it, and that's probably not a great example, but for me, success is achieving an outcome, but it's how you achieve that outcome. So talk about the grey area of cricket at the moment that's happened in South Africa. It's probably not success, but for me, it's setting out to achieve something, and then how do you go about that? So
awesome. And finally, why did you play cricket?
love of people. I love the community aspect that sport gives. I grew up in a community that was sport, and got some great friends from it. So whether or not I'm playing in 3 or 4 years' time, I'll definitely be involved in a club, and whether it's cricket or whether it's another sport, that's the sense of community and what you can actually take out of that and what you can give is so significant. So if you look at it through that lens, I think you'll be pretty happy for the rest of your life, and that's what the plan is.
Awesome. Well, Blizz, thank you so much. You've
Thanks
given
for
us
having me.
Absolute gold there, and hopefully the audience no doubt took a lot from it, and best of luck for your future.
Thank you.